Find the highlights under latest audio at cfax1070.com and on the free iHeartRadio app.
We continue to talk about how the federal budget passed yesterday narrowly. 170 to 168 was the narrow vote for the confidence motion that could have toppled the minority government. And the way we made that work was a couple of, or I should say 4 abstentions, 2 from the Conservatives, 2 from the NDP, and Elizabeth May with the Green Party voting yes and joining the government in that particular vote. So that's how it went down. Let's get a reaction to it from somebody who is there in the House on the government side of things. Will Greaves is the Member of Parliament for Victoria. He's joining us on the line from Ottawa. Sir, hello, how are you?
Hi, good morning. I'm doing well, thanks. Thanks for having me.
I want to ask you, were you nervous, or was anybody in the party actually nervous about this vote yesterday, or did you assume that the other parties would let it pass somehow? What was the mood like going into this for you yesterday?
A little bit of both, to be honest with you. We felt pretty confident that Canadians didn't want another election so soon after the last one, and that felt like something that the opposition parties had also heard clearly from constituents, and they were signaling that they really weren't prepared to bring down the government, but wanted to save face somehow along the way. So we felt pretty confident that the budget was going to pass, and it was going to be through the kind of things that we saw at the end of the day, opposition members who conveniently absented themselves so that the budget would have enough votes.
And were you expecting that at all, or was there any kind of backroom chat that sort of let you know, like, oh, okay, this is in the works, a couple of them are going to sit out, it's going to be fine, or were you completely in the dark when it all went down in the vote?
I mean, there are backroom chats, I'm sure, that happen somewhere above my pay grade, so I'm not necessarily privy to those as a backbench member. But I will say I was surprised to see a Conservative member, an active Conservative member, who abstained. That seems a little inconsistent with that party's frequent line of attack on the government. But I was really pleased, on the other hand, to see Green Party leader and our neighboring MP, Elizabeth May, vote in favor of the government, which I thought was a strong signal of support from her for some of the climate and environment priorities that are outlined in the federal budget.
I know that's a big issue for you as well. I know you have that as one of the issues near and dear to you, the environment and climate. And she said that she decided last minute, it was like a day of decision when she heard from Mark Carney's commitment on meeting our climate targets in the Paris Agreement. Can you talk about what those are?
Yeah, so the Paris Agreement was signed in 2015 and outlines different targets over the medium and longer terms for emissions reduction amongst the countries that signed, including Canada. In our case, the targets have now shifted a little bit, so we've actually added an additional kind of layer of target, if you will, which is a goal of net zero by 2050. But there are also some interim targets in the meantime for 2030 and 2035, looking in particular at emissions reduction of 20% by 2030 from a baseline of 2005. So that's kind of the goal that Canada's emissions reduction and climate policies are working towards.
And is this government, your government, committed to those goals? I mean, like, I know you said you're committed, but we're also on a path of nation building that involves a lot of resource extraction, natural gas and oil and all this stuff, building all of this stuff and the capacity to produce those fuels is a big part of what we're embarking on. Can we do that and also meet these climate targets?
Mm-hmm. The government and the Prime Minister are clear that the targets remain in place and that those are the goals that we're working towards. I do think it's fair to note that in the recent context of the trade and tariff war with the United States and a lot of the pressures that have been placed on us to strengthen our own domestic economy, that we may have to think a little bit differently or more creatively in terms of how we get to those goals. Some of the tools, some of the approaches that had been introduced for various reasons, have either been shelved or don't seem like they're going to necessarily be enough to get us there. So there are other things which are currently, under active discussion, which the government has championed, that are going to, yes, in the short term, create probable increases in emissions related to natural resource extraction. There's also emissions related in building, and transportation. So when we talk about strengthening the economy, there is often a kind of implicit recognition of carbon emissions, associated with that, but also moving towards things like decarbonizing and reducing the amount of carbon that is released from oil and gas extraction, introducing methane emissions, strengthening Canada's industrial price on carbon so that we actually have a system that clearly incentivizes heavy emitters and big industries to reduce their footprint, their ecological impacts in the course of doing business. So we need all of these tools, and they're all on the table as part of how we're going to get to those goals in the longer term.
Let's talk a bit more about this budget that passed yesterday. The federal budget is now, I guess there's a few more procedural steps, but we got through the big hurdle. We don't have to go to an election. But that means that now this budget is a thing that's going to get implemented. And let's talk about what that means for Victoria. A lot of attention's been paid on Royal Athletic Park as one of the big things that Victoria could see out of this.
Yeah, well, Royal Athletic Park was listed by name in the federal budget. And, that's a little bit unusual. Not every riding in the country certainly has a piece of infrastructure or a major project that gets name dropped in a federal budget like that. So it's kind of exciting for us, I think, to see the federal government recognizing some of the opportunities and some of the priorities that we have. So we had an announcement last week, $6 million that the federal government will make available for the city to make a bunch of upgrades to Royal Athletic Park. And I think it's just a sign of how it is that our community is really well positioned to benefit from, among other things, the $51 billion community infrastructure fund, the Building Community Strong Fund, as it's called, that it will be now, in existence after the budget has passed, and that we as a community, I think, stand to really benefit from. Also, increases in defense spending and defense-related infrastructure that in Greater Victoria, when we think about CFB Esquimalt, we also, I think, can make a really strong case for why some of those investments should be directed towards the South Island. So I'm really excited for the opportunities to advance our projects that this budget will create.
On the Royal Athletic Park money, you mentioned the $6 million. Now, is it $6 million that the city can apply for, or are they just getting it, or how does that bit of it work?
The city will have to apply. There will have to be a proposal that the city puts forward for what that money would go to support, what the actual details of the spending at Royal Athletic Park would be. But by virtue of being listed in the budget and, in collaboration with my team and with the federal government, the city, has a very high expectation that funding will be awarded once their proposal has been submitted.
And is it directly for Royal Athletic Park, or could the city come forward and say, actually, we'd like that $6 million for some other infrastructure project? Is that a possibility? Or does this have to be for Royal Athletic Park?
This specific announcement and that $6 million figure is specific to Royal Athletic Park, but we know that there are lots of other priorities that the city has, that the District of Oak Bay and the District of Saanich have. We've had lots of discussions, my office, with the municipalities about other projects that we also hope to put forward for some of the infrastructure money that's available. So that $6 million is specific to Royal Athletic Park, but that's not where, the end is in terms of opportunities for federal funding.
Gotcha. Well, we'll see how this budget also goes on to affect things in Victoria and beyond, because it passed. We don't go to an election. The federal government did pass its budget yesterday. I think there's a few more procedural things to come, but more or less it looks like that's the path we're on. So Will Greaves, Member of Parliament for Victoria, with the Liberals, with the government. Much appreciated. Always a pleasure to talk to you, and we'll do it again soon.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thanks.